She agreed to marry a man everyone said was incapable of satisfying a woman. A marriage without touch, without desire. That was exactly what Adriana wanted after having her heart shattered. But when their eyes met at the altar, something shifted. The way he looked at her, it wasn't indifference. It was hunger. It was promise. And that night, in the candle-lit suite, when he whispered, "You're safe with me," as his fingers grazed her skin, Adriana realized she had married the wrong man, or perhaps exactly the right one. Adriana Reynolds never imagined she'd be standing in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting a wedding dress for the second time in her life. The first time had been 6 months ago. A lacy, delicate dress chosen with tears of joy in her eyes. That dress now lay crumpled at the back of her closet, stained by the memory of a public betrayal that shattered not only her heart, but her faith in romantic love. The dress she wore now was different, simple, elegant, without illusions. She ran her fingers over the white satin, feeling the coolness of the fabric against her warm skin. The jasmine perfume her mother had sprayed in the air still floated through the room, sweet and suffocating. Outside, the October sky was heavy with gray clouds, as if nature itself hesitated to witness what was about to happen. "Are you sure about this?" Claire's voice, her best friend's, cut through the silence. She was leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, her expression worried. Adriana didn't answer right away. Her green eyes, which once sparkled with hope, now seemed duller, protected by invisible walls she herself had built. She turned to Claire and forced a smile. "Sure about what? Marrying a man who won't hurt me because he won't even touch me?" Claire sighed, walking toward her. The sound of her heels on the wooden floor echoed through the empty room. She took Adriana's hands, cold, trembling, and squeezed them firmly. "Audrey, you know what people are saying about him, don't you? Damien Blackwell isn't just reserved. They say he's incapable, that no woman has been able to—" She paused, searching for the right words. "That he can't. You understand?" Adriana pulled her hands away and turned back to the mirror. The rumors about Damien Blackwell weren't a secret to anyone. A successful businessman, owner of a fortune built with intelligence and coldness. He was also the subject of cruel gossip. They said he was impotent. They said his ex-fiancée, Vanessa Hale, had let slip malicious comments in exclusive social circles, insinuating that Damien was handsome on the outside but empty on the inside. And strangely, that was exactly what Adriana wanted. After Marcus, her ex-fiancé, had cheated on her with the maid of honor at their own wedding rehearsal, Adriana had reached a bitter conclusion. Desire was dangerous. Passion was destructive. Romantic love was a lie wrapped in empty promises. Damien Blackwell offered something different. An agreement. A marriage of convenience. He needed a wife to silence the rumors and protect his business reputation. She needed stability, financial security, and above all, emotional peace. No touching, no desire, no broken heart. "I understand perfectly," Adriana finally said, her voice steady. "And that's exactly why I'm doing this." Claire shook her head in disbelief. "You're burying the Adriana I know. The girl who believed in happy endings, in kisses in the rain, in—" "That girl died when she found her fiancé sleeping with her best friend at the altar," Adriana interrupted, her voice cutting like broken glass. She took a deep breath, softening her tone. "Claire, I appreciate your concern, but this is my choice. Damien and I have a clear agreement. There are no expectations, no disappointments, just mutual respect." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the distant sound of wind beating against the windows. Claire finally nodded, though her eyes still carried doubt. "Then I'll be there by your side always." Adriana smiled, this time a genuine smile, and hugged her friend. Claire's citrus perfume mixed with the jasmine in the room, creating a strangely comforting combination. 2 hours later, Adriana stood at the church entrance. The Gothic structure rose imposingly before her, with its stained glass windows filtering the weak afternoon light. The sound of the organ reverberated through the stone walls, solemn and majestic. Her father, at her side, held her arm gently. He hadn't asked questions, just offered silent support. Adriana felt the weight of the dress, the bouquet of white lilies in her hands, scentless flowers chosen purposefully, and the accelerated beating of her own heart. "This is just a contract," she repeated to herself. "Just an agreement, nothing more." The doors opened, and then she saw him. Damien Blackwell stood at the altar wearing an impeccable black suit that fit perfectly to his tall, athletic body. His dark hair was combed back, revealing a face with striking lines, a defined jawline, firm lips, deep eyes of a grayish tone that seemed to carry hidden storms. But it wasn't his appearance that made Adriana stop in the middle of the aisle. It was the way he looked at her. There was no indifference in that look, no coldness. There was something raw, intense, almost hungry, as if he were seeing not just a bride walking toward him, but something that awakened in him, a hunger he didn't even know he possessed. His eyes traveled over every inch of her, from the delicate veil to her nude painted lips, from the curve of her neck to the way her hands gripped the bouquet with excessive force. And when their eyes finally met, Adriana felt a shiver run down her spine. That wasn't the look of an incapable man. That was the look of a dangerous man. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way her body reacted, the sudden warmth in her cheeks, the tightness in her chest, the strange feeling of vulnerability. She continued walking step by step, each movement echoing in the almost reverent silence of the church. When she finally reached the altar, her father kissed her forehead and placed her hand in Damien's. The moment his fingers touched hers, Adriana felt an electric current. His hands were large, calloused, warm. He held her hand firmly, but also with unexpected gentleness, as if she were something precious he feared breaking. "You look beautiful," he murmured so quietly that only she could hear. His voice was deep, husky, and carried a weight that made her heart race. Adriana couldn't respond. She just nodded, unable to look away from his eyes. The priest began the ceremony, but the words became a distant blur. All she could feel was Damien's presence beside her, solid, magnetic, impossible to ignore. His scent, a mixture of wood and something slightly smoky, invaded her senses. His closeness made her skin tingle. When the moment came for vows, Damien turned completely toward her. He held both her hands, and there was something in his eyes, an intensity, an unspoken promise that made Adriana momentarily forget why she was there. "I promise to respect you," he said, his voice firm but loaded with emotion. "To protect you, and never, never hurt you." The words were simple, but the way he said them, the way his eyes penetrated hers, made Adriana feel something move inside her chest, something she had sworn to bury forever. She repeated the vows, her voice trembling, and realized her hands were sweating. And then came the kiss. Adriana expected something chaste, mechanical, just a symbolic seal, but when Damien's lips touched hers, the world stopped. The kiss started gently, almost reverent, as if Damien were testing the boundaries of unknown territory. His lips touched hers with delicate pressure, firm enough to be felt, light enough to let her breathe. But then, something changed. Adriana felt his hand slide to the nape of her neck, his long fingers threading through her pinned hair, with a gentleness that contrasted with the growing intensity of the kiss. His thumb caressed her cheek softly, a small gesture, almost imperceptible to the guests watching, but devastating to her. Her knees weakened. She had to grip his shoulders to keep from stumbling, and when she did, she felt the solidity of his masculine body beneath the impeccable suit. Tense muscles, heat radiating through the fabric. His woody scent invaded her senses more forcefully now, mixed with something indefinable that was purely him. The kiss deepened for just a second, a subtle movement of his mouth against hers, a promise whispered without words. Before Damien pulled away slowly, as if each inch of distance cost monumental effort, when she opened her eyes, Adriana met his gaze fixed on hers. There was fire there, raw, unfiltered desire that he didn't try to hide. And for a terrifying and thrilling moment, she saw beyond the masks, beyond the rumors, beyond the cold agreement they'd made. She saw a man who wanted her. Applause echoed through the church, breaking the trance. Adriana blinked, trying to regain her composure, but her hands still trembled when Damien intertwined her fingers with his and guided her down the aisle. Outside, the sky had opened into a light rain. Delicate drops fell on the church's stone steps, creating a gentle rhythm that contrasted with the chaos inside Adriana's chest. Damien removed his jacket and placed it over her head, protecting her as they ran toward the black limousine waiting for them. Inside the car, the world suddenly became silent. The interior was black leather, soft and cool against the exposed skin of her shoulders. The darkened windows blocked out the reality outside, creating an intimate bubble where only they existed. The sound of rain drumming on the roof was almost hypnotic. The air was charged with the smell of new leather, her perfume, gardenia, and his that damned smoky wood that was now etched in her memory. Adriana was hyper-aware of every inch of Damien's body sitting beside her. He wasn't touching her, but the proximity was enough to make her skin tingle. She could hear his breathing, controlled, but not entirely calm. She could feel his heat radiating through the small space between their bodies. "Are you okay?" His voice broke the silence, low and husky. Adriana turned to face him, and what she saw completely disarmed her. He wasn't looking forward, pretending indifference. He was looking directly at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "Yes," she managed to say, though her voice sounded less convincing than intended. Damien tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You're shaking." She hadn't noticed, but it was true. Her hands, resting in her lap, trembled subtly. Before she could respond, he took one of her hands in his, a simple gesture that sent waves of heat up her arm. "It's cold in here," he murmured. Though they both knew the car was perfectly heated, he massaged her hand gently, his thumbs tracing slow circles over the sensitive skin of her palm. It was a chaste touch, even comforting, but there was something about the way he did it with complete attention, as if nothing else in the world mattered in that moment, that made Adriana's heart race dangerously. "About what happened back there," he began, and she felt her whole body tense. "The kiss?" Adriana swallowed hard. It was part of the ceremony. It was, he agreed, but his eyes said something else. But it didn't need to be that way. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to establish boundaries, remind him of the agreement they'd made. Marriage without touch, without complications. But another part, a part she was desperate to silence, wanted to know what else he had to say. "Why was it?" she asked, surprising herself with the courage. Damien was silent for a long moment, his fingers still holding her hand, and she could feel his pulse racing against her skin, an involuntary revelation that he wasn't as controlled as he appeared. "Because when I saw you walking toward me," he said slowly, each word measured, "I forgot everything. The rumors, the agreement, the reasons we were doing this." He paused, his eyes penetrating hers. "All I could think about was how much I wanted that moment to be real." The air left her lungs. Adriana opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. The raw honesty in his voice, the vulnerability he allowed her to see, it was more than she expected, more than she was prepared to handle. The limousine made a smooth turn, and the movement brought them involuntarily closer. His shoulder brushed hers, and even through the layers of fabric, Adriana felt the electric shock. "Damien," she began, but didn't know how to finish. He released her hand, and for an instant she felt the loss of warmth, but only to raise his hand to her face. With agonizing gentleness, he brushed away a strand of hair that had escaped from her elaborate updo. His fingers grazed her temple, slid down the line of her jaw, and then pulled away. "I know what we agreed to," he said, his voice even lower now, almost a whisper, "and I'll respect that. But I needed you to know that it was real. For me, it was real." Adriana closed her eyes, trying to control the flood of emotions, threatening to overflow. She had built such high walls, had armored herself with such determination against exactly this feeling something. And now, with just one kiss and a few honest words, Damien was threatening to destroy every brick of that protection. When she opened her eyes again, he was still watching her, but there was something different in his gaze. Now, patience. As if he were willing to wait as long as necessary, without pressuring, without demanding. "We're arriving," the driver announced through the intercom, breaking the moment. Adriana looked out the window and saw the luxury hotel rising before them, a modern structure of glass and steel that gleamed even in the rain. The Grand Meridian was known for its opulent suites and impeccable service. It was where they would spend their first night as husband and wife, or as she had planned, where they would sleep in separate beds, maintaining the safe distance she so needed. But now, as Damien stepped out of the car and extended his hand to help her, As she felt his fingers wrap around hers once more, Adriana wasn't so sure she could maintain that distance, because something had changed, and she didn't know if she had the strength to fight against it. They walked together through the hotel entrance, her hand still in his, and each step seemed charged with an electric tension that neither dared to name. The elevator glided silently to the top floor, and Adriana watched the digital numbers change. 10, 15, 20, 25. While her heart matched each digit with an accelerated beat, the confined space amplified everything. Damien's controlled breathing beside her, the almost imperceptible sound of his clothing brushing against hers when he adjusted himself, the woody scent that now seemed impregnated in her own skin. She observed their reflection in the elevator's polished mirror. Damien was impeccable, even after hours of ceremony. His tie still perfectly aligned, his hair only slightly disheveled from when he'd run his hand through it inside the limousine. She, on the other hand, felt like she was beginning to fall apart. Some strands of hair had escaped from her updo. Her lips were still slightly swollen from the kiss at the altar, and there was a flush on her cheeks she couldn't control. The elevator emitted a soft ding when they reached the 30th floor. The doors opened to a private hallway, just one door at the end, adorned with golden details and a discreet plaque. Imperial Suite. Damien placed his hand on the small of her back. A light but possessive touch that guided her down the corridor. Even through the fabric of her dress, she felt the heat of his palm and her body reacted involuntarily, her skin breaking into goosebumps. When he slid the keycard and opened the door, Adriana wasn't prepared for what awaited her. The suite was a masterpiece of seduction disguised as elegance. The first thing that hit her was the aroma, an enveloping mixture of white roses, vanilla, and something slightly spicy like cinnamon. Dozens of candles were scattered throughout the room, their flames dancing softly, casting golden shadows that played on the immaculate white walls. Rose petals, red, pink, and white, formed a winding path from the entrance to the king-size bed that dominated the center of the room. The bed itself was a visual temptation. White satin sheets were artistically arranged with more petals scattered over them, creating a vibrant contrast. Soft pillows, at least 10 of them, were stacked against the upholstered headboard. White voile curtains floated gently with the breeze from the air conditioning, creating an ethereal, almost dreamlike sensation. An entire wall was glass, offering a panoramic view of the city illuminated at night. The lights twinkled like earthly stars, and the rain that still fell created hypnotic patterns on the glass. On the right side, a partially open door revealed a marble bathroom with a soaking tub large enough for 2 people already prepared with steaming water and petals floating on the surface. Adriana stood frozen in the entrance. "Jesus," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Damien let out a low laugh, almost embarrassed. "I swear I didn't plan this." He ran his hand through his hair, disheveling it even more. "My secretary. She has her own ideas about what a bridal suite should be." There was something endearing about seeing him slightly flustered. Damien Blackwell, the ruthless businessman who commanded board meetings with absolute authority, was clearly out of his comfort zone. "She has a talent for creating atmospheres," Adriana commented, trying to keep her voice light, but failing miserably when it came out husky. He closed the door behind them and the sound of the latch clicking seemed too loud in the charged silence. They were alone now. Completely alone. No guests. No priest, no driver, just the 2 of them, and that absurdly romantic suite. Damien walked to a side table where a bottle of champagne rested in a silver ice bucket. 2 crystal flutes were positioned beside it, capturing and reflecting the candlelight in delicate prisms. He opened the bottle with precise movements. A soft pop, followed by the effervescent sound of liquid being poured. "Champagne," he offered, extending a flute to her. Adriana accepted, grateful to have something to do with her hands. When their fingers brushed as she took the glass, she felt that electric shock again, smaller this time, but still there, throbbing beneath the surface. He raised his own glass. He paused as if searching for the right words. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed, and they clinked glasses. The crystal chimed melodiously. Adriana brought the glass to her lips and drank, feeling the bubbles burst against her tongue, the slightly sweet taste of champagne sliding down her throat. The alcohol warmed her from within. but not as much as Damien's gaze as he watched her drink. He wasn't being lecherous. There was nothing disrespectful in the way he looked at her, but there was hunger. A contained, civilized hunger, but undeniable. It was like watching a predator who had chosen not to attack, not from lack of desire, but out of respect. "You must be tired," he said finally, breaking the silence. "It's been a long day." Adriana nodded, though she didn't feel tired at all. Her body was on high alert, every nerve awake and attentive. Damien placed his glass on the table and began to loosen his tie. The movement should have been mundane. She'd seen men loosen ties 1,000 times, but there was something hypnotic about the way his fingers slid through the knot, pulling the dark silk away from the white collar. "There are robes in the closet," he said, gesturing to a door on the other side of the room. "And I can sleep on the couch if you prefer." She blinked. "The couch?" He pointed to a beige leather sofa positioned near the window. It was clearly comfortable, but also clearly not a bed. "Our agreement," he said simply. "I won't pressure you into anything you don't want." And there it was again, that damned honesty of his that disarmed all her defenses. Adriana placed her glass next to his. "Damien, you don't need to." "You're safe with me," he interrupted gently, taking a step toward her. Not so close as to invade her space, but close enough that she had to tilt her head to look into his eyes. "I need you to know that you'll always be safe with me." The words were simple, but the weight behind them, the conviction in his voice, it made something inside her chest tighten painfully. "I know," she whispered, and realized it was true. He smiled, a small half-smile that was devastatingly attractive. "Good." Then he stepped back, creating distance again. "I'm going to take a quick shower. The room is yours." He grabbed a suitcase that had been left discreetly near the closet and disappeared into the bathroom. The door closed with a soft click, and Adriana could finally breathe. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city stretched below her, indifferent to the chaos within her. She could hear the muffled sound of the shower on the other side of the door, and her mind treacherously conjured images of Damien under the hot water, drops sliding down that body she'd briefly felt when she leaned on him at the altar. "Stop," she commanded herself. This wasn't part of the plan, but her body wasn't listening to her mind. Her body was too busy remembering the taste of his lips, the warmth of his hands, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious, desirable, necessary. Adriana moved away from the window and grabbed her own suitcase. She needed a distraction. She needed to regain control. In the closet, she found a silk robe, white naturally, and changed quickly, removing her wedding dress and hanging it carefully. When she slid the robe over her body, the cool fabric against her heated skin made her shiver. When she emerged from the closet, Damien was back in the room, and he saw her. Damien stood near the bed, wearing only gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips. His chest was bare, and Adriana felt the air trapped in her lungs. She had imagined he would be athletic beneath the impeccable suits he always wore, but the reality was far more striking than any fantasy. His torso was a sculpted work of art, defined muscles without exaggeration, a line of dark hair that descended from his chest to disappear beneath the waistband of his pants. His skin was still slightly damp from the shower, small droplets of water glistening in the candlelight. His dark hair was wet, disheveled in an effortless way that made him look younger, more accessible. He turned when he heard the sound of her emerging from the closet, and froze. His gaze traveled over every inch of her, from her bare feet to the white silk robe that hugged her curves, revealing the silhouette of her body without actually showing anything. The thin fabric was almost translucent under the soft candlelight, and she saw the exact moment he realized this. His jaw clenched, his fists closed slightly at his sides. His breathing became more audible, but he didn't move. "Sorry," he said, his voice strained. "I was going to get a shirt." Adriana should say something. Anything. But her throat was dry. She just nodded, unable to look away from him. Damien walked to his suitcase, moving with a feline grace that made her stomach tighten. Every muscle in his back rippled beneath his skin as he bent down to grab a t-shirt. When he pulled it over his head, Adriana felt a ridiculous pang of disappointment. The fabric covered that glorious chest, but somehow the tight t-shirt only highlighted his physique even more. "Better?" he asked, turning to face her. "No," she thought. "Much worse." "Yes." she lied. A heavy silence fell between them. The candles continued their hypnotic dance. The soft sound of rain against the window was the only noise besides their breathing, increasingly less controlled, increasingly more synchronized. Adriana forced her legs to move, walking toward the bed. The distance between them was only a few meters, but it felt like miles. She was hyper-aware of every movement she made, of how the robe brushed against her thighs, of how the cool air in the room made her nipples harden beneath the thin fabric. Damien watched her. Not obviously, not invasively, but she felt it. She felt the weight of his gaze as if they were physical hands sliding over her skin. Adriana. His voice cut through the silence like a hot blade through butter. She stopped, turning to face him. Yes. He took a step toward her. Just one, but it was enough to change the entire atmosphere of the room. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air becoming denser, hotter. I know we agreed to something specific, he began, and she could see the struggle in his eyes. Desire battling respect, need fighting honor. But I need to tell you something. Her heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. What? He took another step. Now they were less than a meter apart, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the water droplets still caught in his dark lashes, close enough to notice he was trembling, an almost imperceptible vibration that betrayed the iron control he was trying to maintain. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, he said, each word measured, deliberate, and being here in this room, knowing I can't touch you. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply as if trying to compose himself. It's killing me. Adriana felt her legs weaken. She gripped the edge of the bed for support, her fingers sinking into the soft satin sheets. Damien. But I won't, he continued, opening his eyes and fixing them on her with an intensity that left her breathless. I won't touch you unless you ask me to. I won't break the promise I made. There was something devastatingly attractive about his restraint, in the way he was clearly holding himself back, fighting every instinct, but respecting the boundaries she had established. It made him more desirable than any bold move could have. Adriana opened her mouth to speak, but didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to maintain the distance, stay true to the plan she had made so carefully, but another part, a part that was growing louder by the second, wanted to walk over to him and discover what it would be like to be touched by those hands. Before she could decide, Damien stepped back, creating distance again. You must be exhausted, he said, though his voice was still tense. He gestured vaguely toward the couch. Stay there. But he didn't move. He stood there looking at her as if he were memorizing every detail. The way her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, the flush on her cheeks, the way she unconsciously bit her lower lip. You don't need to sleep on the couch, Adriana heard herself say. The words came out before she could censor them. The bed is big enough for two. His eyes widened slightly. Surprise, hope, and something darker flashing in his gray depths. Are you sure? No, her brain screamed. This is a terrible idea. Yes, her mouth said. Damien nodded slowly. He walked to the other side of the bed, keeping the maximum distance possible from her, and pulled back the sheets. The sound of the fabric sliding seemed too loud in the charged silence. Adriana did the same on her side, slipping beneath the satin sheets that were cold against her heated skin. She lay on her back, looking at the ceiling, very aware of his body just inches away. Damien lay down too, and the bed sank slightly with his weight. She could feel his heat, even without them touching. She could hear his breathing, controlled but not calm. Good night, Adriana, he said softly. Good night, she whispered back. He turned on his side, his back to her, a gesture of respect, giving her privacy. But she continued staring at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes, unable to ignore his massive presence beside her. Minutes passed. The rain continued its gentle melody. The candles began to dim, their flames growing smaller, casting deeper shadows. Adriana turned on her side, facing him, and observed Damien's broad back. The t-shirt stretched over his shoulders, the way his muscles moved subtly with each breath, and then he turned too. Suddenly, they were face to face in the dark, with only inches separating their faces. She could see his eyes gleaming in the dim light. She could feel his breath mingling with hers, warm, irregular, Neither spoke, neither moved. But something was happening in that silence. A conversation without words, a negotiation of unspoken desires. Damien raised his hand slowly, so slowly that she could have stopped him if she wanted, but she didn't stop him. She watched, hypnotized, as his fingers reached for her face. He brushed away a strand of hair that had fallen over her eyes, tucking it behind her ear with reverent gentleness. The touch was brief, chaste, but it left a trail of fire on her skin. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his voice full of a raw emotion that made her chest tighten. Adriana couldn't respond. She just looked at him, at this man who was supposed to be safe, uncomplicated, without desire, and realized she had been completely wrong. There was nothing safe about Damien Blackwell, and she was in danger of losing herself completely in him. Morning arrived with a golden light that filtered through the voile curtains, painting the room in shades of honey and amber. Adriana awakened slowly, her senses coming to life one at a time. First, the smell of fresh coffee floating in the air, then the distant sound of waves breaking against the sand, and finally the acute awareness that she was alone in bed. She sat up, the satin sheet sliding down her body, and looked around. Damien wasn't in the room, but there were signs of his presence. The t-shirt he'd worn the night before was carefully folded over an armchair. His suitcase was open near the closet, and on the side table was a tray with coffee, fresh croissants, strawberries, and a single white rose in a small crystal vase. Beside the rose, a note written in elegant, masculine handwriting. "Good morning. I took the liberty of ordering breakfast. I'm on the balcony when you'd like to join me. No pressure. Dua." Adriana held the note, feeling the heavy paper between her fingers, and couldn't contain the small smile that curved her lips. There was something sweet about his formality, the way he continued giving her space, even when they both knew something had changed between them the night before. She got up, changed the robe for a light white linen dress, simple with thin straps and a modest neckline that ended just above her knees, and pinned her hair in a loose bun, letting some strands frame her face. She grabbed a strawberry from the tray, biting into the juicy fruit as she walked barefoot toward the balcony. The glass doors were ajar, and the sea breeze invaded the room, bringing the smell of salt, seaweed, and something fresh that only the ocean could produce. She pushed the doors open completely and stepped out. The balcony was expansive with light wood flooring and white wicker furniture. Damien was leaning on the railing looking at the sea, wearing a light blue linen shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and khaki pants. The wind tousled his hair, and the sunlight made his tanned skin glow. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the smile that lit up his face was like a punch to her stomach. Genuine, warm, devastating. "Good morning," he said, and his voice had a different quality in daylight, softer, more accessible. "Good morning," she replied, walking over to stand beside him at the railing. The ocean stretched infinitely before them, a carpet of turquoise blue speckled with white foam where the waves broke. The hotel's private beach was a strip of pristine white sand, with no one in sight except for some seagulls dancing in the air, their cries echoing over the water. "It's beautiful," Adriana murmured. "It is," Damien agreed. But when she looked at him, she realized he wasn't looking at the sea. He was looking at her. Her cheeks flushed and she quickly looked away, pretending to be fascinated by a seagull diving for fish. "I thought," he began, his voice hesitant in a way she found endearing, "that maybe you'd like to walk on the beach. If you want, of course. We don't have to." "I'd like that," she interrupted, turning to face him. "Very much." His smile widened, and she saw the relief in his eyes, as if he'd been genuinely worried she would refuse. 15 minutes later, they were descending the stone steps that led from the hotel area to the beach. Adriana had changed her dress for a more casual outfit, white linen shorts and a light peach-colored blouse, and carried her sandals in her hand. Damien was beside her, equally barefoot, with his pants rolled up to his calves. When their feet touched the sand, Adriana felt the cool, rough texture between her toes, comforting and primal. The sun warmed her skin, contrasting deliciously with the cool breeze coming from the sea. They began walking side by side, maintaining a respectful distance. But Adriana was acutely aware of his every movement, the swing of his arms, the rhythm of his steps that he adjusted to match hers, the way he occasionally looked at her as if he couldn't help himself. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. breaking the comfortable silence. Adriana hesitated. The truth was, it had taken hours to fall asleep, too aware of him beside her, of his warmth, of the way he'd whispered good night in a voice that seemed to promise things he wasn't saying. But when she finally slept, it was the deepest sleep she'd had in months. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "And you?" He paused, running his hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Not much, but not for bad reasons." She looked at him curiously. "No." He stopped walking, turning to face her completely. The wind tousled his hair, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "Adriana, I stayed awake because I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said simply, without beating around the bush. "About how much I wanted to hold you, but knew I couldn't. About how every inch of distance between us felt like torture." Her heart raced. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Damien took a step toward her, closing the space between them. "I know you've been hurt. I know you have reasons to keep your distance, but I need you to know." He raised his hand, hesitating for a moment before delicately touching her arm. Just a touch, his fingers grazing her skin from wrist to elbow in a movement so gentle it could have been the wind. "I would never hurt you. Never." The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, it was too much. Adriana felt her walls crack a little more. "I know," she whispered. And then, without thinking, without planning, she reached out and intertwined her fingers with his. It was a small gesture, simple, but the impact was seismic. Damien looked at their intertwined hands as if he were seeing a miracle. Then his fingers closed around hers, firm, possessive, reverent, and he smiled. Not a polite or contained smile. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes and made them shine like polished silver. They continued walking hand in hand, and Adriana felt something loosen in her chest, something she had kept locked away for months. The feeling of his hand in hers was perfect, strong enough to make her feel protected, gentle enough to make her feel valued. His thumb traced lazy circles on the back of her hand, an unconscious movement that sent waves of warmth up her arm. She found herself paying attention to every detail. The slightly rough texture of his palm, hands that worked, hands that built things, the contained strength in his fingers, the way he adjusted his grip occasionally, as if he needed to make sure she was still there. They walked to an area where the waves barely touched the sand, leaving a foamy line that disappeared almost instantly. Adriana released his hand just enough to crouch down and touch the water. Freezing. Salty. Alive. When she stood up, Damien was watching her with an expression so intense it took her breath away. "What?" she asked, laughing nervously. "You," he said simply. "Just you." Before she could respond, a stronger gust of wind completely tousled her hair, throwing strands across her face. She raised her hand to brush them away, but Damien was faster. He stepped forward, his hands reaching for her face with a gentleness that contrasted with their size. He carefully brushed the strands away, tucking them behind her ears, but his hands didn't pull away immediately. Instead, they remained there, framing her face, his thumbs caressing her cheeks in movements so gentle they were almost imperceptible. They were close now, so close that Adriana could count the golden flecks in his gray eyes, could see the way his breathing became irregular, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Adriana," he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, like a confession, like a promise. She knew he was going to kiss her. She could see the intention in his eyes, in the way his gaze fell to her lips and stayed there. And for the first time since she'd agreed to this marriage without touch, she wanted it. Wanted it so badly it hurt. But Damien didn't move. He just held her, looking at her as if he were memorizing every detail, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Adriana didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward just a fraction, just enough, and saw his eyes widen in surprise and raw desire. The following week passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing tension. Damien and Adriana existed in a delicious and torturous limbo, touching each other just enough to keep the flame burning, but never enough to satisfy it. Intertwined hands during silent dinners, prolonged gazes over breakfast, goodnight kisses that started chaste and ended leaving them both breathless, trembling with restraint. But reality, as always, had its own plans. The annual Blackwell Industries charity event was a tradition, a gala evening where businessmen, politicians, and high society figures gathered under the pretense of charity, but really negotiated deals and cultivated connections. Damien had mentioned the event reluctantly, making it clear that Adriana didn't need to attend if she didn't want to. But she wanted to. She wanted to stand by his side, support him, be part of his life in a way that went beyond the safe walls of their private rooms. Now, standing in the grand ballroom of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, wearing an emerald green evening gown that hugged her curves and had a slit that went up to her thigh, Adriana began to question her decision. The ballroom was opulent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling like inverted constellations, casting prisms of light over guests dressed in their finest. Tables were covered with immaculate white tablecloths, white rose centerpieces, and flickering candles. An orchestra played softly in a corner, classical melodies that served as a backdrop to the constant murmur of conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. Damien stood beside her, impeccable in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. His hand was on the small of her back, a possessive touch she'd learned to recognize and secretly adore. He introduced her to investors, business partners, old acquaintances, and Adriana smiled politely, shook hands, made small talk. But she felt the stares, the discreet whispers behind fans and wine glasses, the curious expressions, some sympathetic, others frankly skeptical. "Ignore them," Damien murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin, making her shiver. "You're perfect. They're just jealous." She smiled at him, grateful, and was about to respond when she felt the change in his body, a sudden tension that ran through his muscles like electricity. His jaw clenched, his eyes, which had been warm and affectionate seconds ago, were now cold as steel. Adriana followed his gaze and understood immediately. A woman was crossing the ballroom toward them, and even in a room full of beauty and elegance, she stood out. Tall, with platinum blonde hair falling in perfect waves over tan shoulders, she wore a blood-red dress that was more provocative than elegant. The neckline plunged dangerously low, and the skirt had slits on both sides that revealed endless legs. But it wasn't her appearance that made Adriana's stomach tighten. It was the smile, a cat's smile after catching a canary. "Damien." The woman purred when she got close to them, her voice husky and deliberately seductive. "What a surprise to see you here, and with company." Her eyes, blue and cold as ice, slid to Adriana, assessing her from head to toe in a look that managed to be simultaneously dismissive and evaluative. "Vanessa," Damien responded, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I didn't know you were on the guest list." Vanessa laughed, a shrill sound that made several heads turn. "Darling, I'm always on the list. You should know that." She extended her hand with perfectly manicured nails in blood red to Adriana. "Vanessa Hale, Damien's ex-fiancée, and you must be the new wife." The tone was sweet as poisoned honey. Adriana shook her hand, brief, formal, and felt the coldness of Vanessa's fingers even through the minimal pressure. "Adriana," she replied simply, refusing to let this woman intimidate her. "Adriana." Vanessa repeated as if tasting the name. How charming. Damien always had a soft spot for charity projects. She laughed again, as if she'd made a hilarious joke. Damien stepped forward, placing himself partially between Adriana and Vanessa. "Vanessa, if you came here just to be disrespectful—" "Relax, darling," Vanessa interrupted, tapping his chest lightly with the fan she carried. The gesture was too intimate, too familiar, and Adriana felt a sharp pang of something that took a moment to recognize as jealousy. "I just came to greet your new wife." The pause, before the word was deliberate, loaded with insinuation. She turned to Adriana, tilting her head like a predator studying its prey. "You know, dear, I really must congratulate you. Marrying Damien is, well, it's an interesting choice." "Interesting?" Adriana repeated, keeping her voice calm even as her heart began to race. Vanessa murmured, taking a step closer. Her perfume, something heavy and musky, invaded Adriana's space. "He didn't tell you about why we broke up, about the challenges." "Vanessa," Damien warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Enough." But Vanessa was just getting started. She turned to a small group of people who had discreetly gathered nearby, drawn to the drama like moths to light, and raised her voice just enough to be heard. "I just think it's fair that she knows," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false concern. "After all, I was engaged to him for 2 years. 2 long years. And let me tell you, dear," she leaned in as if to share a secret, but her voice remained loud, "the rumors aren't an exaggeration. He's, let's say, inadequate for the more physical aspects of marriage." The ballroom became noticeably quieter. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Adriana felt the blood drain from her face. Not from her own embarrassment, but from the humiliation she saw flash through Damien's eyes. Quick, but devastating. "I tried to be patient," Vanessa continued, now clearly performing for the growing audience. "God knows I tried, but a woman has needs, you understand, and when a man can't..." She made a vague gesture with her hand, leaving the sentence unfinished, but perfectly clear. "You're lying," Adriana said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. She stepped forward, placing herself in front of Damien now, her green eyes blazing. "And you know it." Vanessa arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow, surprised to be challenged. "Excuse me?" "I said you're lying," Adriana repeated louder this time. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her voice remained steady. "I don't know what game you're playing, but..." "Game?" Vanessa laughed. But there was a sharp edge to it now. "Darling, I'm just trying to save you from the same fate I suffered. 2 years wasted with a man who may have the looks, may have the money, but can't..." She paused dramatically. "Well, you understand." Damien gently gripped Adriana's arm. "Let's go," he murmured, his voice with repressed emotion. "She's not worth it." But before they could move, Vanessa played her final card. "I have proof, you know," she said casually, examining her nails. "Messages, emails, medical consultations he tried to keep secret. I could make them public, of course, but..." She looked up, her eyes meeting Damien's. "I'm not cruel, just honest." The silence that followed was deafening. Adriana felt Damien tremble beside her, not from anger, but from something deeper: shame, pain, the humiliation of being exposed in front of everyone. And then he did something that broke her heart. He released her arm and stepped back, creating distance as if he wanted to protect her from the contamination of his own tarnished reputation. "Damien," Adriana whispered, turning to him. But he didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched so tight she could see a muscle pulsing. "Let's go," he said again, still not looking at her. And this time, when he began walking toward the exit, Adriana followed him, aware of every stare, every whisper, every satisfied smirk that followed them. Vanessa had won this round, and Adriana felt something inside her break as she watched the man she'd begun to love be destroyed before her eyes. The silence in the car during the drive home was suffocating. Damien drove with his hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white from the force, his jaw clenched in a hard line. He hadn't said a single word since they left the hotel. Not when handing the ticket to the valet, not when opening the car door for her, not when he accelerated down the illuminated avenue, leaving the event and the humiliation behind. Adriana watched his profile in the car's dimness, intermittently illuminated by passing streetlights. She wanted to say something, anything, to break that heavy silence that seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. But every time she opened her mouth, the words died in her throat because she didn't know what to say. Were Vanessa's accusations true? The question crawled through her mind like a poisonous snake, and she hated herself for even considering it. But the seeds of doubt had been planted with surgical precision, and now they were growing, intertwining with her thoughts. She remembered all the times Damien had stopped, how he'd never pressured her, how his kisses, though intense, always ended with him pulling away, breathing irregular, hands trembling. She had interpreted it as respect, as chivalry. But what if it was something else? "No," she told herself firmly. "You saw the desire in his eyes. Felt it. He wants you. You know that." But Vanessa's voice echoed in her head. "The rumors aren't an exaggeration. He's inadequate for the more physical aspects of marriage." When they finally reached Damien's penthouse apartment, a modern minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city, He parked in the private garage and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. "Damien," Adriana began softly. "Don't." He cut her off, his voice loaded with barely contained emotion. "Please, just don't." He got out of the car before she could respond, slamming the door harder than necessary. Adriana followed him, her high heels echoing on the concrete garage. She caught up with him at the elevator, and they rode up the 30 floors in a silence that felt physical, like a wall between them. When the elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, Damien went straight to the bar. Adriana watched as he poured a generous dose of whiskey into a lowball glass, the amber liquid catching the soft light of the recessed fixtures. He drank it all at once, grimacing as the alcohol burned his throat. "Are you going to tell me what you're thinking?" Adriana asked, removing her shoes and walking barefoot into the living room. The marble floor was cold under her feet. Damien refilled his glass, but didn't drink this time. He just held it, staring at the liquid as if it contained answers. "What do you want me to say, Adriana?" "The truth," she replied simply. "I want the truth." He laughed, a bitter sound without humor that made her heart squeeze. "The truth?" "Right." He finally turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes made her involuntarily recoil. Pain, anger, shame, all intertwined in a storm of raw emotion. "The truth is, you just witnessed my ex-fiancée humiliate me in front of half the city's business elite. The truth is, the rumors she spread will haunt me for the rest of my life. The truth is..." "The truth is, whether what she said is real," Adriana interrupted, hating how her voice trembled. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien stared at her, and she saw the exact moment he understood what she was asking. Saw the hurt flash through his eyes, quick but devastating. "You're asking me?" he said slowly, each word precise and cutting as glass. "If I'm impotent..." Adriana closed her eyes, flinching at the rawness of the word. "I need to know why." He placed the glass on the table with such force she was surprised it didn't break. "Why does it matter, Adriana? We had an agreement. No touching, no desire. Remember? So why the hell does it matter if I can or can't?" "Because it changed," she shouted, and the words echoed through the empty apartment. "Everything changed, Damien. We changed. And I need to know if..." She paused, struggling to control her breathing. "If what we feel is real, or if you're just pretending because you can't." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The damage was done. Damien became completely still. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and Adriana saw something die in his eyes, something precious and fragile that she didn't even know existed until she saw it disappear. "I see," he said finally, his voice cold and distant in a way she'd never heard before. "You want to know if I'm man enough for you? That's not it, isn't it?" He took a step toward her, and she saw the anger now, not directed at her, but at himself, at the world, at the impossible situation they found themselves in. "Then what is it, Adriana? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. It looks like you're asking me if the rumors are true, if Vanessa was right, if I'm the failure she says I am. Damien, please. You want the truth?" His voice rose, breaking slightly on the last word. "The truth is, Vanessa lied. Spread those rumors because I broke up with her, not the other way around. I broke up with her because I found out she was cheating on me with my own business partner, and instead of accepting the rejection, she decided to destroy my reputation." He ran his hands through his hair, undoing the perfect styling. "But you know what's funny? It doesn't matter how much I deny it. It doesn't matter how many times I tell the truth. People will believe what they want to believe." Adriana felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm not people. I'm your wife. Are you?" The question was soft but loaded with deep sadness. "Because right now, Adriana, it seems like you're like everyone else. Doubting, questioning, believing the lies of a woman who hates me, instead of..." He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind." "Instead of what?" Adriana pressed, taking a step toward him. "Instead of believing in me." The words exploded from him with a force that stopped her in place. "Instead of trusting what you felt, what we shared, the way I looked at you, touched you, wanted you so badly it hurt." His voice broke again. "But maybe Vanessa won after all. Because if you can doubt me so easily—" He didn't finish. He just grabbed his jacket from the sofa where he'd thrown it and walked toward the guest room, a space neither of them had used since they returned from their honeymoon. "Where are you going?" Adriana asked, her voice small. Damien stopped in the doorway, but didn't turn. "I'm giving you what you obviously want. Distance." And then he closed the door, leaving Adriana alone in the cold vastness of the apartment. She stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. The tears finally came. Silent, hot, unstoppable. She let herself fall onto the sofa, hugging her knees to her chest, and cried. She cried for the trust she had broken, for the doubt she had let in, for the look of hurt in Damien's eyes when she questioned the one thing that should have been unquestionable. The following days were an exercise in silent torture. Damien left early for the office and came back late, always after she was already locked in the master bedroom. They left polite notes. "There's food in the fridge. I'll be working late. Don't wait up for dinner." Like strangers sharing a space, not like two people who had shared breathless kisses and whispered promises in the dark. Adriana tried to immerse herself in work, accepting freelance graphic design projects that kept her hands busy, but not her mind. Because no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about him. And at night, when the apartment was silent, and she was alone in the huge bed they had shared, she listened. On the third night, she heard a sound that made her sit up in bed, her heart squeezing, coming from the living room, a muffled sob. She got up silently, opening the bedroom door just a crack. Damien was on the sofa, sitting in the dark, his head in his hands, and he was crying. It wasn't loud or dramatic crying. It was the kind of crying from someone desperately trying to stay silent, from someone breaking inside but not wanting anyone to know. His shoulders shook. His breathing was irregular, choppy. Adriana felt her heart break. She had done this. Her doubt, her question, her moment of weakness had destroyed something precious between them. And now he was here alone in the dark, suffering in silence because she hadn't trusted him when it mattered most. She wanted to go to him, wanted to wrap him in her arms, apologize, say she'd been an idiot, that she knew he would never lie to her. But her feet remained rooted in place, paralyzed by shame and fear that it was already too late. So silently she closed the door and returned to bed. But the sound of that muffled crying followed her, echoing in her mind long after the apartment fell silent again. And she knew with a certainty that cut like a knife that she had a choice to make. She could continue hiding behind doubt and fear, or she could fight for the man she had begun to love. Adriana spent the following morning in a state of nervous determination. She had made her decision during the empty hours of dawn when sleep refused to come, and the sound of Damien's muffled crying still echoed in her mind like a persistent ghost. She needed the truth. Not the truth filtered through her own insecurities or Vanessa's poisonous lies. The real concrete truth that she could hold in her hands and use to rebuild the trust she had broken. At 9:00 the morning, she sat in a discreet cafe downtown, her hands trembling slightly around a cup of cappuccino that grew cold untouched. Across the table, Marcus Chen, a private investigator who came highly recommended by Claire, scrolled through a tablet, his fingers sliding quickly across the screen. "You were right to come to me," Marcus finally said, his eyes still fixed on the device. He was a middle-aged man with thin-framed glasses and a posture that suggested quiet competence. "Vanessa Hale isn't exactly what you'd call a reliable witness." Adriana leaned forward, her heart racing. "What did you find?" Marcus turned the tablet toward her, revealing what appeared to be a series of emails. "These are communications between Ms. Hale and a gossip journalist known for publishing planted stories in exchange for payment. She literally paid to have rumors about Mr. Blackwell spread." Adriana felt her breath catch. She read the emails, each word confirming what part of her had always known but had allowed doubt to obscure. "There's more," Marcus continued, sliding to the next screen. "Text message records between Ms. Hale and James Cordova, Mr. Blackwell's former business partner. The messages date back 2 years and are, well, explicit. They were having an affair while she was still engaged to Mr. Blackwell." Adriana covered her mouth with her hand, nausea rising in her throat. "She cheated on him extensively," Marcus confirmed with a nod. And when Mr. Blackwell found out and ended the engagement, she apparently didn't take it well. Phone records show she actively campaigned to defame him in social and business circles. But what about the medical records? Adriana asked, remembering Vanessa's threat at the event. She said she had proof, medical consultations he tried to keep secret. Marcus sighed, removing his glasses to clean them. That was harder to track down, but we eventually found the source. 3 years ago, Mr. Blackwell underwent appendicitis surgery. Routine procedure. No complications. Ms. Hale apparently obtained access to his medical records illegally. There's an ongoing investigation into that and twisted information to create this false narrative. Adriana felt tears sting her eyes. He was telling the truth all along. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said gently. Mr. Blackwell is, by all medical accounts I could legally access, a perfectly healthy man. Ms. Hale's allegations are completely unfounded. Adriana took the tablet, her hands shaking as she examined all the evidence Marcus had meticulously compiled. Each document, each message, each record painted a clear picture. Damien had been the victim of a cruel smear campaign orchestrated by a vindictive woman who couldn't accept rejection. "Can I have copies of all this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've already prepared a complete package for you," Marcus replied, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Everything is documented and can be used legally if Mr. Blackwell decides to sue for defamation, which frankly, I recommend." Adriana held the envelope against her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world, because in a way it was. It was proof that she had failed him, that she had let doubt poison something beautiful, and now she needed to fix it. When Adriana returned to the apartment at 2:00 the afternoon, she didn't expect to find Damien home. He had meticulously avoided being in the same space as her for the last few days. But there he was, sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by papers, with a laptop open in front of him. He looked up when she entered, and the expression on his face, guarded, distant, as if he'd built walls around himself, made her heart break. "Adriana," he said, his voice polite but cold. "I didn't know you'd be home." "I needed to talk to you," she said, placing her purse on the sofa, but keeping Marcus's envelope in her hands. Damien returned his attention to the laptop. "If it's about the divorce papers, my lawyer can—" "Divorce?" The word came out like a strangled cry. "You're talking about divorce." He finally looked at her, really looked, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. Deep, dark circles. A pallor that hadn't been there before. A sadness that seemed to have seeped into his bones. "What else did you expect, Adriana? We clearly can't continue like this." "You're right," she said, taking a step toward the table. "We can't, but not because of divorce." She placed the envelope on the table directly on top of the papers he was working on. "Because of this." Damien frowned, picking up the envelope. "What is this?" "Open it," she said simply, her voice trembling. He hesitated, then opened the envelope and began leafing through the documents. Adriana watched as his face went through a series of emotions. Confusion, recognition, shock, and finally something that looked painfully like hope. You investigated Vanessa?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I needed to know the truth," Adriana said, tears finally spilling over. "The real truth, not the twisted version she planted in my head. And, Damien," her voice broke, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you, should have believed in you without needing proof. But I let my own insecurities, my own fears poison something beautiful, and she couldn't continue." Sobs overtook her, her shoulders shaking as everything she'd held in for the last few days finally overflowed. Damien stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. In 2 long strides, he was in front of her, his hands framing her face, thumbs wiping away the tears falling in torrents. "Adriana," he whispered, and there was so much emotion in his voice. Relief, pain, love. "Don't cry. Please don't cry. I hurt you," she sobbed, her hands gripping his wrists. "I doubted you when you needed me to believe most." "I'm human," he interrupted gently. "You're human, Adriana, and Vanessa is a master manipulator. She planted those seeds on purpose, knowing exactly where they would do the most damage. But I shouldn't have let her. Adriana insisted, looking into his eyes through her tears. I felt what was between us, felt it with every touch, every look, every moment. You held me like I was something precious. And still, I let doubt in. Damien closed his eyes, resting his forehead against hers. You know what was worst? His voice was low, vulnerable. It wasn't the doubt. It was thinking I'd lost you, that you'd leave believing the lies that I'd never have the chance to show you. Show me what? She whispered. He opened his eyes, and what she saw there took her breath away. Raw desire, yes, but more than that, love. Deep, consuming love. The kind she'd stopped believing existed. To show you how much I love you, he said, and the words fell between them like an earthquake. To show you that every word, every touch, every promise I made was real. That you make me feel things I never thought I'd feel. That the idea of losing you, his voice broke, destroyed me. Adriana let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You love me? With every part of me, he confessed, and there were tears in his own eyes now. I love you, Adriana. I've loved you since that first day when you walked down the church aisle, looking so scared but so brave. I loved you when you gave me your hand on the beach. Loved you every night I slept beside you, fighting every instinct to hold you closer. And I loved you, even when you doubted. Because I understand why you did. Because if our roles were reversed, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Adriana kissed him. It was a desperate kiss, salty with both their tears, full of forgiveness and promise and love that could no longer be contained. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and he responded by wrapping his arms around her, lifting her off the ground as if he never wanted to let her go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Damien rested his forehead against hers again. I want you, Adriana whispered. Not as part of an agreement. Not for safety or convenience. I want you, Damien. All of you. Now, always. His eyes widened, darkening with desire. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Damien kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no restraint. It was a kiss that spoke of all the nights they'd spent apart, of all the desire they'd repressed, of all the love they could finally express without fear. His hands slid from her hair to her back, tracing the curve of her spine through the thin fabric of her dress. Adriana arched against him, feeling the solidity of his body, the heat radiating through the layers of clothing still separating them. She could feel his heart beating against hers, racing, wild, alive. Bedroom, she whispered against his lips and felt his smile. Yes, he agreed. But instead of releasing her, he lifted her into his arms, as if she weighed nothing. Adriana let out a surprised laugh, wrapping her arms around his neck as he carried her down the hallway. She took the opportunity to kiss the line of his jaw, feeling the roughness of his stubble against her lips. He shivered under her touch, his arms tightening around her. When they reached the bedroom, Damien placed her gently on the bed, and for a moment he just stood there looking at her with an expression that made her stomach tighten. There was reverence in that look, admiration and a desire so intense she felt heat spread through her entire body. You're so beautiful, he said, his voice loaded with emotion. And I want to do this right. I want you to feel. He paused, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture she found endearing. I want it to be perfect for you. Adriana sat up, reaching out her hand to him. It's already perfect because it's with you. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and sat on the edge of the bed beside her. I never, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle to find the right words. Adriana, I need you to know. With Vanessa, it was never like this. It was never real. It was superficial, empty. But with you, he raised her hand, pressing his lips against her knuckles. With you, everything is different. Everything matters. The words melted something inside her. She used her free hand to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the arch of his lips. Show me, she whispered. Show me what it's like when it's real. Something changed in his eyes. A darkness, an intensity that made her heart race. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a slow, deep kiss that seemed endless. His hands found the zipper on the back of her dress, and he opened it with deliberate slowness, as if unwrapping the most precious gift. The dress slipped off her shoulders, and Adriana felt the cool air of the room against her heated skin. She should have felt vulnerable, exposed, but the way Damien looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen made her feel powerful. "My God," he breathed, his eyes traveling over every inch of revealed skin. He reached out, hesitating for just a second before tracing a line from her shoulder to the curve of her waist. The touch was light, exploratory, but left a trail of fire in its path. Adriana trembled, and it wasn't from cold. Her hands went to his shirt, trembling fingers struggling with the buttons. Damien covered her hands with his, helping her, and together they undid each button until the shirt could be pulled free. When she slid the fabric over his shoulders, revealing the torso she'd only briefly glimpsed before, she couldn't resist touching him. Her palms flattened against his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the muscles that contracted under her touch, the heart that beat as fast as hers. She explored with reverent curiosity the valleys between his ribs, the hard surface of his abdomen, the line of dark hair that disappeared beneath the waistband of his pants. "Adriana," he groaned, and the sound of her name on his lips, hoarse and needy, sent a wave of heat through her. He laid her down gently, his body covering hers, but not putting all his weight on her. He braced himself on his forearms, and she could feel the tension in his muscles, the effort it took to control himself, not to rush. "Look at me," he whispered. And she obeyed, her eyes meeting his. And then he kissed her, not just her lips, but her entire body. He kissed her forehead, her temples, the tip of her nose. He kissed the curve of her neck, the sensitive hollow of her collarbone, the valley between her breasts. Each kiss was a promise. Each touch was worship. Adriana arched beneath him, her hands exploring his back, feeling the muscles ripple under his skin as he moved. She had never felt so alive, so present in her own body. Every nerve was on fire. Every breath was shared. His hands mapped her body with meticulous attention. The curve of her waist, the contour of her hips, the softness of her thighs. He memorized each reaction, each small sound she made, adjusting his touch to bring her more pleasure. "You're perfect," he murmured against her skin, his voice vibrating through her. "Absolutely perfect." Adriana pulled him into another kiss. This one, more urgent, more needy. Her hands went to his belt, and this time there was no hesitation. She wanted to feel all of him. She wanted no more barriers between them. Damien helped her, removing the last pieces of clothing until there was nothing more separating them. Skin against skin, heat against heat. They stayed like that for a moment, just feeling the newness, the intimacy, the deep connection that went beyond the physical. "Are you still sure?" he asked. And there was vulnerability in his voice. Not doubt about his body or his capabilities, but genuine concern for her well-being, for what she wanted. "More than anything," she replied, pulling him closer. When they finally joined, it was with a deliberate slowness that took both their breaths away. Damien paused, giving her time to adjust, his eyes never leaving hers. She could see everything there. The effort it took to control himself, the pleasure he was feeling, the love that shone through everything. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice strained. "Perfect," she whispered, moving her hips experimentally. "You can move." And he moved slowly at first, establishing a rhythm that built gradually, that gave her time to lose herself in the sensation, to get used to the fullness, the absolute intimacy of the act. They moved together as if dancing an ancient choreography, their bodies finding a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. Damien whispered words of love against her skin in English, in fragments of other languages she didn't know, in sounds that weren't words but carried meaning anyway. Adriana felt something building inside her. A tension, a pressure that grew with each movement, each touch, each kiss. Her hands gripped his shoulders, nails digging lightly into his skin as she approached something vast and overwhelming. "I love you," Damien whispered. And the words were the spark that lit the fire. Adriana shattered, her body arching as waves of pleasure crashed through her. She heard herself cry out, not in pain but in pure, overwhelming release. Damien followed moments later, his body trembling as he buried his face in her neck, groaning her name like a prayer. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing irregular, hearts beating in unison, bodies intertwined in a way that felt essential, necessary. When Damien finally lifted his head, Adriana saw tears in his eyes. She raised her hand, gently wiping them away. "Why are you crying?" she whispered. He took her hand, pressing it against his chest where she could feel his heart still racing. "Because you made me whole," he said simply. "Because, for the first time in my life, I feel completely seen, completely loved, completely yours." Adriana felt her own tears begin to fall. "You're my home," she said, echoing the words he'd once said. "And I'm completely yours." The first rays of sunlight filtered through the bedroom, painting everything in golden and pink tones. Adriana awakened slowly, wrapped in a warmth that had nothing to do with the satin sheets. Damien's arm was around her waist, holding her against his chest, as if even in sleep he couldn't bear to let her go. She turned carefully to face him, not wanting to wake him yet. In the soft morning light, he looked younger, more at peace than she'd ever seen him. The lines of tension that normally marked his forehead had disappeared. His lips were curved in a slight smile, as if even his dreams were happy now. Adriana reached out, lightly tracing the line of his jaw, and his eyes opened immediately, alert, focused, and then softening when he saw her. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep, and the sound sent a delicious shiver down her spine. "Good morning," she whispered back. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair and inhaling deeply. "I was afraid it was a dream," he confessed against her hair, "that I'd wake up and you'd still be on the other side of the apartment avoiding me." Adriana tilted her head back to look into his eyes. "It's not a dream, and I'm never going to pull away from you again. I promise." He kissed her. A slow, lazy kiss that had all the time in the world. There was no urgency this time, just the sweet certainty that they had all the days ahead to love each other like this. When they finally got out of bed, much later than either of them normally would, Damien made coffee, while Adriana prepared scrambled eggs. They moved through the kitchen in a synchronized dance, purposely bumping into each other, stealing kisses between tasks, laughing at jokes that weren't really funny, but made them happy. "Anyway, I need to do something today," Damien said as they sat at the balcony table, the city stretching below them under the clear blue sky. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Adriana looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. "What?" He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts before finding what he was looking for. "I'm going to call my lawyer. Vanessa needs to answer for what she did. Not just to me, but to you too." "Damien, you don't need to." "I do," he interrupted gently. "For us, because what she did was more than defamation. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy not just my reputation, but any chance I had of finding happiness with someone else. And I'm not going to let her get away with it." Adriana nodded, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "Then I'll be with you every step of the way." And she was. During the following weeks, as the legal case against Vanessa took shape, Adriana was by Damien's side at every meeting with lawyers, at every deposition, at every difficult moment when the past was dredged up and examined. She held his hand when the lies were exposed publicly. She hugged him when anger and frustration threatened to overwhelm him. She reminded him repeatedly that what they had was real, and no amount of Vanessa's poison could change that. The turning point came 3 weeks later when Marcus Chen, the private investigator, delivered even more damning evidence. Vanessa hadn't just lied about Damien. She'd done it to other men before him. There was a pattern, a history of manipulation and defamation going back years. When confronted with the evidence at a court hearing, Vanessa finally broke down. Her confession, recorded, legal, irrefutable, was broadcast by all the media outlets that had originally spread her lies. "I was angry," she admitted, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "He rejected me, and I couldn't accept it. So I wanted to destroy him the way I felt he destroyed me. But I was wrong. Everything I said was a lie. The vindication should have been sweet." But when Damien watched the broadcast in his office, Adriana by his side, she saw only sadness in his eyes. "You feel sorry for her," she observed, surprised. "I feel sorry for the person she could have been," he corrected, "for the life she wasted on bitterness and revenge. But mostly," he turned to Adriana, framing her face with his hands, "mostly, I feel grateful. Because if she hadn't spread those rumors, if you hadn't looked for a marriage without desire, we never would have found each other." Adriana felt tears sting her eyes. "Do you believe in destiny?" "I believe in you," he replied simply. I believe in us. 2 months later, Damien proposed to Adriana. Technically, they were already married legally, officially with a certificate and everything, but he got down on one knee anyway on a private beach at sunset, the ocean painted in shades of orange and purple behind him. Adriana Reynolds Blackwell, he began, and his voice trembled slightly. The first time we got married, it was for the wrong reasons. It was for convenience, for protection, for security. But now, he opened a small velvet box revealing a ring, not the simple gold band she wore, but something new. An emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the setting sunlight and glowed like liquid fire. Now I want to marry you for the right reasons. For love, for choice, for desire that doesn't end but only grows stronger every day. Tears flowed freely down Adriana's face. Now, Damien, marry me again? He asked. And there was so much raw emotion in his voice that it broke and healed her heart simultaneously. Not because you need security or because I need a wife, but because we choose this, because we choose each other every day forever. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, yes. 1,000 times. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and stood up, taking her in his arms and spinning her while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her back down, he kissed her, and it was a kiss that contained all the promises that never needed to be said aloud. They married again 3 months later in an intimate ceremony on the same beach. Claire was there, radiant as maid of honor. A few close friends and family surrounded them, but this time, when Adriana walked down the makeshift aisle of petals in the sand, there was no doubt in her heart, no fear, no hesitation, just absolute certainty that she was walking toward the man she loved, the man who had taught her that safety and passion weren't mutually exclusive, that respect and desire could coexist, that love, real love, wasn't found in the absence of difficulties, but in the choice to stay even when things got hard. When Damien kissed her this time, with the ocean witnessing, with the sun setting in a gold-painted sky, it wasn't just a kiss of celebration. It was a kiss of promise. A promise that they had chosen each other, not out of necessity, not out of convenience, but out of love. And that choice made freely, with open eyes and full hearts, was the most powerful of all. That night in their home, because now it was truly their home, filled with memories they'd built together, Damien held Adriana close, their bodies intertwined beneath white sheets. You know what's funny? He whispered in the dark. What? She asked, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. All those rumors, all those lies, they were meant to destroy me. But in the end, he kissed her forehead. They led me to you, and I wouldn't change that for anything. Adriana smiled against his skin. Then maybe we should thank Vanessa. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound she'd never tire of hearing. Maybe. But I'd rather spend my time thanking you. Why? For choosing me, he said, simply, repeatedly, every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Adriana leaned back to look into his eyes. You chose me too, from the beginning, even when I couldn't see it. Then we're two lucky idiots, he joked. But there was seriousness in his eyes. The luckiest, she agreed. And as they fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, they both knew the truth that no rumor, no lie, no doubt could ever destroy. They had found something rare and precious. A love that wasn't perfect, but was real. A love that wasn't easy, but was chosen. A love that was stronger than fear and deeper than desire. A love that was worth every moment of struggle to reach it. And that love built on choice, trust, and courage, was the kind that lasted forever. Adriana had entered that marriage looking for protection, walls high enough to never feel pain again. But what she found was a man who taught her that truly loving means choosing every day to be vulnerable. Damien wasn't perfect. Neither was she. But together they discovered that true love isn't born from the absence of scars, but from the courage to show them to someone who promises never to use them against you. Maybe the question isn't, how do I avoid getting hurt, but rather, who is worth the risk? And for Adriana, the answer would always be him, and maybe deep down this story speaks to us too.